Hello, welcome all. Today I brought you here to talk about a special place that we all know and go to when it is nice out and you go outside for a walk, if you want to hang out with your friends and family. Usually people go on field trips or if you have a school project. Zoos. Everybody goes to the zoo, everybody loves the zoo, and there's a lot of benefits to it, but today we're not going to talk about all those benefits. We're going to talk about the downside and why zoos should be limited. The three reasons on why zoos should be limited is for one, it is bad for the animals. Two, it is bad for our ecosystems and our environment. And three, animals are not objects. Now, before we get into all of this, let's talk about, on the other hand, how zoos actually do help. We have two most popular zoos in the United States. We have the Omaha Henry Dory Zoo, and then we have the San Diego Zoo in California. These two zoos take all the funds they get from memberships and from food, and they take it to help the newborn babies and to help the animals with their survival. Now, let us talk about our first reason and why it's bad for animals. There are over 3,000 zoos in the United States, and if they were all for the same reason, which was to help the purpose of the animals, that number would decrease drastically. These animals are in cages, and according to Why Zoos Are a Prison, it talks about how animals that are in zoos lose their survival rate, which makes it very hard for them to go back into the wild if they are ever to be able to be released again. Currently, when you go into a zoo, you'll see them walking around the same habitat and eating around the same time. They usually eat the same food unless the zookeepers allow them to hunt for their prey if they are able to do so. But it is not very common due to the fact that they are scared for their own safety, so they'll teach some tricks. If you take a lion, for example, you go to the zoo, you go to the lion cage, you see them laying on a rock. They could be licking their paws, they could be roaring, they actually being quite aggressive because they are tired of doing the same thing. If you also go to zoos, you see some animals can be alone. Sometimes the lions can tend to be alone, which will cause them to be super stressed out and cause them to react in a way they normally wouldn't. Now, let us jump into our second reason, which is the ecosystems and the environment. You go to a zoo and you don't usually just see a squirrel sitting in a cage, but you do see things like a sea lion and an orangutan. All animals are very important to the ecosystem and the environment, which is a part of the food chains. So, if we talk about the environmental impact of zoos, aquariums, and marine theme parks, it talks about how if you take a piece of a puzzle away, it ruins the puzzle. So if you take an animal away from the environment, it can ruin part of the ecosystem in the food chain. If you take, for example, you have a flower. Usually what eats a flower can be insects, bunnies. Today we're going to be using cows. Cows are mostly known for going into petting zoos. When you have a petting zoo, it's nice for all the people because they get to sit there and play with the animal, but the other animals that rely on these cows for a source of food are slowly dying away and having to hunt for their own food, so that species is going extinct or endangered. Then you have the plants. These plants can grow and get overpopulated, and they're not always healthy for the environment, which causes severe issues and it ruins the whole process of the food chain. Now, finally, let's talk about how animals are not objects. According to Why Zoos Are Bad and Why Do We Have Animals in Zoos, it talks about how the animals get very stressed and anxious when they are getting pounded on across the glass or people are making the same noises at them. We have this very own example here from Omaha where you had the silverback from the Omaha Henry Dory Zoo where a girl was banging on the glass and the animal took it as a threat and reacted by pounding on the glass and breaking it. Animals have very bad mental mentality because they're sitting there constantly feeling like they're a threat and supposed to be trusting their caretakers, but they do not trust the caretakers because they do not stop these people from doing that. So, today we just talked about why it is bad for the animals, why it hurts our environment and our ecosystem, and how animals are not objects and should not be looked at like artifacts in a museum. Thank you guys for coming today, and I hope you realize that an animal should not be in a cage unless they are needed to do so.